Hi, I'm Rachael Gauthier, host of the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety's Disaster Discussions podcast. On September 24th, IBHS partnered with III and the U.S. Small Business Administration to host a live LinkedIn audio event, Weathering the Storms: Strategies for Small Business Resilience. With recent storms like Beryl, Francine, and Helene, we hope that small business owners can use the information discussed during this event to better prepare their businesses ahead of the storm, quickly resume operations after, and recover from any damage experienced so that they can get back to business. Here's a replay of the event.
So I want to welcome our fantastic panel today. First up, Fred Malik, nationally recognized as Fortified Fred, a resilient construction expert with more than 30 years of experience as a building industry professional, working in residential and commercial construction since 1994. And for the last 15 years, Fred has served as the managing director of the Fortified Building Program at IBHS. Fred works with homeowners, developers, residential and commercial building contractors, property insurers, and policymakers to improve the performance of existing and new building stock across the United States. Also joining us today, Francisco Sanchez Jr., the Associate Administrator for the U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of Disaster Recovery and Resilience. In his role with SBA, Francisco is responsible for elevating the priority of business and economic recovery by revamping the agency's disaster enterprise to better support America's 33 million small businesses, renters, and homeowners, providing them with the necessary resources to weather any storm and emerge stronger than ever. He has extensive experience in emergency management, recovery, and strategic planning. And Loretta Worters is the Vice President of Media Relations for the Insurance Information Institute, better known as III, focusing her work on improving understanding of key insurance issues across all industry stakeholders, including media, consumers, insurers, producers, and regulators. As a national spokesperson for the property and casualty insurance industry, Ms. Worters is frequently quoted in leading publications, including the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and Forbes, among others, and appears regularly on television networks, including ABC, CBS, NBC, CNBC, CNN, and Fox. All right, so we'll jump right into our discussion today, and we'll start off with talking about hurricane season. We recently hit the climatological peak of hurricane season, and Francine made landfall earlier this season. But as we know, that season is not over just yet. As I mentioned earlier, Florida is in the path of Helene and is likely to wreak havoc on communities there. And in fact, about 80% of all tropical activity in a given season occurs between August and October. So this question goes out to all of our panelists today. What should business owners know to ensure they're prepared moving forward toward the end of the season? And Francisco, I'll let you start out with this one.
Thanks so much for the question. As you mentioned, we're at the peak of hurricane season, but it just takes one storm to cause catastrophic damage to a community or to threaten your business. And so be prepared today. So if you haven't had preparedness, any activities yet in Florida, particularly in Florida right now, this is a good reminder to get those out of the way sooner rather than later, preferably today.
Fred, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that, Francisco made some good points there. And understanding that we've had some pretty significant storms that have made landfall in the last 5 or 6 years between September and October, hurricanes like Ian, Zeta, Delta, Sally, Dorian, Michael, and Sandy, just to name a few. You can bet that there's a lot of risk facing small business owners. A couple of things that they should keep thinking about right now is that the climate as it is favors rapid intensification. And so you need to really take a posture that you want to be prepared, and not just you and your business, but also encourage your employees to take steps so that they're prepared and your workforce remains stable. I guess the last thing is, don't wait. You can do things to make your business stronger and safer. Take action like going to IBHS.org and looking at our Hurricane Ready commercial guide.
All right, Loretta, do you have anything to add to that?
I think what Fred and Francisco said was perfect. I mean, every hurricane is different. It's not if a hurricane will happen, it's when, and that's why it's so important for business owners to be prepared. You know, the Atlantic season is from June 1st to November 30th, and we're finding actually that more and more of this activity is happening later in the year. So while there's no way to lower the risk of a natural disaster, there are critical measures that can be taken to protect your company's bottom line, and a disaster plan and adequate insurance are keys to recovery.
Right, we had that activity right out of the bat this season, quite a lull through August, but now that activity certainly has picked up and the season is now in full swing. So my next question is for Fred, and I'd like to know, what are the most common vulnerabilities for small businesses when it comes to storm preparedness?
Yeah, particularly when we look at small business structures, so the buildings that small businesses occupy, the two primary vulnerabilities are typically going to be the roof and openings like roll-up garage doors or even personnel doors. The roof is the first line of defense. It is out there weathering every single day, and it is primarily responsible for keeping wind and water from entering the building and damaging inventory and disrupting operations. So really making sure that you are taking care of your roof to prevent that cascaded damage is important. Garage doors, as well as other openings, can be really susceptible to high winds, particularly in places that may not be anticipating the most severe winds from hurricanes. So like inland locations that are close to where a storm makes landfall. High winds can push the garage doors in, debris can fly around and puncture those openings. And because the majority of buildings are typically designed to be fully enclosed, which means keeping the wind and the pressure on the outside of the building, any large breaches can lead to air rushing in and pushing out on the walls and up on the roof, which can lead to catastrophic structural failures that can knock businesses offline for a considerable amount of time.
And my next question is for Francisco. How can small business owners identify their specific risks and vulnerabilities?
Yes, great actually question. I think in most communities, I have yet to find a single community where there's not more than one risk. Any from storms to ice storms to flooding to tornadoes to wildfires. And so I would, if you're a business owner or a homeowner, go to your local office of emergency management and see what the primary risks that you're facing are, so you can plan around those. And there's also some great resources, some with the partners online. We've got NOAA, the National Weather Service, that has a tool where you can go and see what natural hazards you might be impacted with in your community, and start with those. Each of those are unique. They have different preparedness measures, but for your specific community, go to those local resources, go to NOAA, see what you're susceptible to, and start planning around those primary disasters. If you're prepared for those, chances are you'll be prepared for almost any disaster that you might encounter.
All right, thank you, Francisco. My next question is, what are the mitigation strategies small business owners can implement to protect their properties from severe weather? And I'd like to hear from both Loretta and Fred on this one.
Well, you want me to take it first? Yeah, I think the key, as we've all been saying, is identifying the specific risks your business face in determining the appropriate coverage needed. As Fred and Francisco have pointed out, we want to have contingency planning, develop a plan of action to respond to any unforeseen events such as a hurricane or a wildfire. Each one is different, so we need to make sure that those are handled properly. Diversify your supply chains to protect against risks, and then of course secure comprehensive insurance coverage.
Fred?
Yep. So I think, those are great tips there from Loretta. I think, making sure that you have a plan and making sure that you have properly resourced recovery resources, that's awesome. There are steps you can take to fortify your building so that it can provide of additional protection for your business. So a couple things to think about. As I mentioned before, we have a free hurricane ready guide for commercial structures that's available at IBHS.org. But if you're going to take some of the steps that we encourage in there, first thing to do is get somebody out to take a look at your roof. Whether you have a steep slope roof or a low slope roof, you want somebody to go up and take a look at it. Make sure that you don't see any gaps or missing pieces, any significant deterioration on low slope roofs. You don't want water ponding or pooling. Work with your landlord if you happen to be a tenant leasing space to get those inspections completed and address any issues that might be found. If your building has gutters, downspouts, or drains, like drains in a parapet wall, for example, make sure that those are free of debris so that the water can move where it needs to move. Sealing up gaps around wall penetrations, windows, and doors also is a great way to keep water from getting in and causing a cascade of damage that might impact your inventory. Talking to your landlord or if you own your property to make sure that tree limbs and debris are picked up and removed. And finally, if you have a generator, make sure that that's been serviced and that it's going to work properly should you lose power.
Thank you, Fred. All great tips there. And moving on to some discussion about building codes, I'd like to know, how do current building codes compare to resilience standards such as Fortified? And what are some of the benefits of exceeding those basic code requirements? And I'd like to hear from everyone on this question. Fred, you can start us off.
Sure. So, I think that most people are aware anyway that there is something called the building code, and that the building code is designed to do a couple of things. And primarily, building codes are designed to preserve life safety. They're not necessarily designed to preserve the utilization of the building. Most people trust that their codes are sufficient to withstand the natural disasters they might face, but that's not always the case. We have about 35% of the American population lives in communities where 35% that have adopted modern building codes. That leaves the rest of the population at considerable vulnerability and risk to potential damage. Modern building codes do work as long as they are properly enforced. One of the things that a program like we offer, called Fortified Commercial in particular, we have used the latest science to understand where there are shortfalls in the current code and layer on top some additional resilient features that help to preserve the usability and the recovery of commercial buildings. And we also, as a part of that program, have a uniform standard for verification, which takes a lot of the inconsistency out that you might have if you're in a location that doesn't have well enforced building codes.
Francisco, anything to add on building codes?
Yes, certainly. As local codes are tailored to whatever your community might face, one of the things to keep in mind is, aside from SBA's disaster programs, is we have lending programs for your business to be able to grow your business, buy real estate, build new facilities, that those allow you to access those funds to build structures that meet local building codes. And in the unfortunate circumstance that you find yourselves having to come to the Small Business Administration post-disaster for a disaster loan because you were impacted, now you can add 20% on top of your verified damage to build back in a way that's stronger and more mitigated, whether you choose to do that proactively or if you are complying with building codes. There are ways to finance that through the Small Business Administration. So ask people to explore those options so they can be more resilient in the face of disasters to come.
Thank you. Loretta, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, building codes can impact insurance too in a number of ways, including insurance premiums. Building codes can help reduce insurance premiums for communities and commercial property owners. Buildings that meet or exceed the safety standards may be eligible for lower premiums, so business owners should take a look at that. From a claims process perspective, insurance companies often require that repairs and replacements meet specific building code requirements. So failure to comply with these codes can result in either denied claims or limited coverage. So it's important for businesses to be aware of that. And from a coverage perspective, insurance companies may offer more coverage to buildings that meet updated building codes. This is because updated codes make buildings more resilient to severe weather, so that can reduce the risk of unexpected events. And then there's coverage loss. Insurance companies may deem coverage too risky and stop insuring buildings that are built using the older energy codes. And then finally, a building code upgrade coverage is something to think about as a business owner. It's also known as law or ordinance coverage and can be added to an insurance policy. And that will help you if you do have a loss that when you rebuild, you can build to code or above. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Loretta. And I want to turn more to more about insurance now. And my next question is also for you as well, Loretta. How can investing in storm resilience impact insurance premiums for small businesses?
Thanks. Well, investing in resilience and preparedness won't prevent these losses, but they can significantly reduce them. For every dollar spent on climate resilience and preparedness, communities can save $13 in damages, cleanup costs, and economic impact. And that's something that's according to a new economic study by Allstate and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Commerce Foundation. As a small and medium-sized business owner, running a business in our current inflationary economy is not easy. Prices are increasing. Unfortunately, with the current insurance hard market, premiums are also increasing, which, especially negatively impacts smaller businesses. So adding to these challenges is the recent surge in inflation. This has led to a significant increase in the cost of materials and labor, and that directly impacts building replacement costs. So to help mitigate costs, it's important to regularly schedule maintenance, which is crucial to lowering business insurance costs. For example, a compromised roof, as we were talking about earlier, can lead to water damage, structural issues. So you want to regularly inspect that, make sure to look for any missing or damaged shingles or gutter blockages, any signs of a leak. And make sure to also document any repairs or upgrades you've made so your broker or insurance professional can factor this proactive behavior into your premium calculations going forward. In fact, we have a new roof kit coming out today that looks at what you can do to prevent those losses.
Thank you, Loretta. And expanding on that a bit more, another question for you. I'd like to know what kind of insurance policy should small business owners consider for covering storm-related damages?
Good question. Once you've established what your risks are, you'll know what kind of coverages you will need. Certainly, property insurance can help protect the property your business owns or leases or rents. So that includes things like the buildings, the equipment, the inventory, your furniture and fixtures. It also provides coverage for loss of accounts receivable and valuable papers and records. And then one that's very important that some businesses don't think about, but it's called business interruption insurance, also known as business income insurance. It's often included in a business owner's policy, sometimes known as a BOP, or as a standalone or rider to a commercial package policy. The perils covered typically include theft, vandalism, fire, wind, hail, lightning, damage from vehicles or even aircraft. So it can also include mechanical breakdown. Keep in mind a BOP is very limited in scope, so you want to check with your insurance professional to ensure you have adequate coverage. Some BOPs are tailored to the individual business and their needs. Business interruption insurance can also include what's called extra expense, which will cover anything beyond the normal day-to-day operating expenses that are necessary to keep your business solvent. And, these are important things. Extra expense covers things like renting a temporary place of business while your business is being restored, replacement of technology, furniture, paying your employees overtime or hiring more employees, leasing equipment. That can be a real problem if you're not in your regular building. It can also be bundled in a BOP, the extra expense, as a separate insurance policy or as a rider to a commercial policy. And then another thing to consider, what a lot of businesses don't, is what's called a utility services endorsement, which extends the business interruption and extra expense coverage and that applies to a suspension of the operations caused by a disruption of the basic utility services. So if a business loses electricity or gas or water, that coverage will help protect you so that you can be up and running. And there's two types of endorsements you can think about. One is called time element. So in the event wind breaks down a power line or a water main is broken, this coverage can cover those losses, including loss of income and expenses. And then you have direct damage, and this is an extension of property insurance, and it provides protection against damage to a business owner's property resulting from an interruption of any of those utility services I mentioned. And lastly, the one thing I really want to point out that's important, because we'll be seeing a lot of this after Hurricane Helene. We've been told that flooding is going to be a big issue. So flood insurance is not covered under a standard business owner's policy. So you want to make sure to purchase flood insurance both for the structure, if you own the building, as well as the contents. Flood insurance can be purchased through the federal government's National Flood Insurance Program, as well as through some private insurance companies. Now, the NFIP has limits, $500,000 on the structure and $500,000 on the content. So you may need to seek private insurance as a second layer of protection. Do keep in mind, there is a 30-day waiting period before being able to purchase flood insurance. So with Helene coming down the pike, that might be hard to get that. But going forward, business owners should really think about doing that.
All right, thank you. And I want to turn to after the event now, after the storm. I'd like to know, what steps should small business owners take to ensure that they make a quick recovery and continuity of operations after the severe weather event has ended? And I'd like to hear from Francisco and Fred on this one.
Yes, great question. What we found is 25% of businesses have a difficult time or cannot recover at all, particularly small businesses after a disaster. And we see that more and more across the country. So after the disaster, certainly you should be looking at ways to access the capital quickly as you can to begin the recovery, to really condense that window. And so certainly SBA's disaster lending programs are here to do that. To give you a little bit of insight what that means, it's 4% over 30 years to help businesses not only with the physical damage, but also economic injury. Oftentimes, Maui is an excellent example. There were businesses, obviously, that were physically impacted, but you see a reduction in spending, a reduction in economic growth, and so you may be a business that has reduced revenue. So we can help those businesses as well. For physical damage, we talked about being able to give you the capital to rebuild, but also build back in a way that's more resilient. If you're a business that is not physically damaged, but seeing a reduction in revenues, we can help you with that, with economic injury disaster lending. So that helps you to get the capital you need to continue to pay your employees, to continue to pay your bills, and all of those essential things. And so I know the last thing people often want to think about is a loan, but we had a study that was recently done by the Wharton School that said businesses, and they did research for more than 10 years, businesses that availed themselves of low-interest long-term loans not only had a quicker path to recovery, but they saw more employment, they saw their business grow, they saw themselves taking on additional capital, but in a good way, not for more debt, but buying new equipment. And so really understand the importance of getting your business back on its feet and getting the capital that you need to get that process going as quickly as you can.
Fred, would you like to respond to that one?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to keep in mind that if you have a plan, that there's a few steps that you're going to take in the near term, immediately post recovery. That includes things like starting to work to get the building to dry out. If it's a commercial structure, making sure that you're plugging leaks, getting fans, getting power back established as soon as you can, get the building dried out, and address any potential damage that there might be. Contact your insurance agent and get them to make sure that they're acting promptly. Take pictures of the damage that you might have so that you have a visual record. Those are some of the near-term things that you might want to do, and those are pretty obvious for folks. On a longer-term outlook, you can really take steps to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the first place, or dramatically reduce the potential that it could happen to you in the future. And that's by following a program like Fortified Commercial or Fortified Multifamily. We touched a little bit on those earlier. And Fortified, does build on the building code to enhance certain features and systems in the house that are in the commercial, in the building or the multifamily structure that are really prone to damage, like the roof and the openings that we talked about. So we have 3 levels. We have roof, silver, and gold. You work with an evaluator who helps to act as a consultant and a documenter as your project is repaired or rebuilt. And by following the steps that we include in Fortified, you can actually dramatically reduce the potential severity of a future claim, or even eliminate or dramatically reduce the possibility that you'll even have a claim the next time. And those kinds of proactive activities can really make the difference about whether or not your business is sustainable and survives in the long term, or whether you're one of those businesses that unfortunately succumbs to the post-disaster consequences.
All right, thank you, Fred. And our final question today, I'd like to ask each of you, if a small business owner could only implement one resilience measure, what would you recommend and why? And Francisco, I'll let you kick us off with this one.
Yeah, so great question. So one, I would say just start and get started. Resilience can be, and mitigation can be something, as I hear businesses across this country just they want to tackle it. They're working on their business. It's a priority, but they see it's a complex thing. The biggest thing is you get started and do that with 3 things. Build a team. You as your business owner or your employees, create a team that everybody has some sense of how your business operates and what the potential points of failure are, so you can tackle that. And second, you ought to have that buy-in from your executive leadership, and you ought to be championing as the business owner or as the CEO, COO, just really giving the people the time they need to focus on that. And keep it simple. A lot of elements to talk, but those are the things to do. And again, I just stress to businesses, simply get the process started and take that first step.
Loretta.
Yeah, all good points. A resilient business is one that prepares for, responds to, and adapts to disruptions to maintain continuous operations. It involves managing risk, and small businesses don't have risk managers. So if you're a small business, you have to be your own risk manager. And that means making sure to respond effectively to unexpected events that could negatively impact your operations, such as natural disasters. So I'd say the one measure is to look at what your risks are and read your insurance policy to make sure those risks are covered. If you're not sure if you have the right type and amount of insurance, check with your insurance professional to make sure you close those gaps.
And Fred.
Yeah, so I get to round it out. So I just want to be a part of the choir that's saying take action. Don't wait. Don't be lulled into a false sense of security that it's not going to happen this year or it's not going to happen here. As we started off this event, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So taking action is important, even small actions. That's a great way to make sure that you're not in a situation where you have to rush and under pressure make really important decisions because you've been making progress along the way. But if it were me and I had a business that I needed to protect, the one thing that I would do right off the bat is I would reach out to a roofer and have my roof inspected. I would make sure that I understand exactly the condition of my roof and any repairs or mitigation steps that can be taken to make sure that that roof is going to be able to keep the wind and water out of the building. That applies whether you're an inline retail store and you have to work with a landlord. If you're a multifamily business owner or developer, property manager, all of those can benefit from making sure that the roofs are in good shape. And if they're not, there's a plan put in place to address that.
Thank you, Fred. And as we conclude today's event, I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to share your organization's resources with our listeners today. So, Loretta, how can people find out more about III?
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I think the best thing, Rachael, is for people to go to our website. It's www.iii.org. And we have a large amount of resources, particularly, for consumers on the business side and the personal side. We also have a lot of information on roofs as well. So please feel free to take a look. And if anybody has any questions, they can always direct message me on LinkedIn.
And Francisco, how can people find out more about SBA?
Yes, so actually we have one of the most friendly government websites with the name. It's just sba.gov, and you can go there to learn not just about disasters, but all the programs we have, from capital for businesses to contracting opportunities to the counseling that we have, and obviously the disaster space before, during, and after. If you haven't visited, please come in to see how we can help you not only survive business after disaster, but how we can grow your business in non-disaster times as well.
And Fred, how can folks learn more about Fortified and IBHS?
Yeah, so accessing some of the great resources we have, just go to ibhs.org. We have the Hurricane Ready Guide there for commercial and multifamily buildings. You'll also find links there to go to the free resources we have for our Fortified commercial and Fortified multifamily programs. There you'll find free checklists and a very comprehensive workflow chart that tells you just how to go about starting an application and connecting with all the right teammates to help you execute on your making your building stronger, safer, and more durable in the future.
All right, Fred, Loretta, Francisco, thank you for all the great information today. And thank you to everyone listening for joining us for Weathering the Storm Strategies for Small Business Resilience. And we hope that all the small business owners listening today are leaving this event better informed and prepared for severe weather. Thanks for joining us.